Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The countdown is on. In less than 12 hours from now, India's election results will start coming in. This is the biggest and longest election in the world. Exit polls predict a third term for Prime Minister Modi with an even bigger victory margin. The opposition has rubbished the numbers. Meanwhile, the Election Commission of India came out today to respond to all the charges against it. So the battles are far from over. And when the electoral process itself is questioned, the casualty is the credibility of India's democracy. We'll discuss that. Also, elections in South Africa, where the ruling ANC is looking for alliance partners for the first time, and Mexico, which has elected its first ever woman president. In the Gaza war, there's a new peace plan on the table, but will it bring peace? Why are Israeli tourists leaving the Maldives, and where does India figure in this story? How airlines are making record revenue this year, despite mounting challenges. Why there's a debate in Turkey over stray dogs, how the upcoming Euro Cup has exposed racism in German football, and what is the Las Vegas of prisons? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Imran Khan acquitted of leaking state secrets, but the former Pakistani Prime Minister will remain in jail on other charges. Khan was convicted in the ceasefire case ahead of the election in February. He had cited the case as evidence of an American conspiracy to force him out of power in 2022. Georgia signs its controversial foreign agents bill into a law. There have been widespread protests over it across the country. Critics say the law is modeled on Russian legislation used to stifle dissent. The United States has threatened to sanction Georgian officials who have backed the bill. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will attend the upcoming G7 summit, he is trying to ramp up support for the Ukraine Peace Summit, but Kiev is yet to confirm whether Zelensky will participate in person or virtually. The G7 summit will be held in Italy from the 13th to the 15th of June. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov begins his Africa tour. His first stop is junta-led Guinea. This is Lavrov's first visit there since 2013. Isolated by the West, Russia has been trying to boost its influence in Africa. And Toyota apologizes for cheating on vehicle testing. Japan's top automaker halts production of 3 models. The cheating involved using inadequate data in collision tests and incorrect testing of airbags in crashes. The wait is nearly over. Hours from now, India will start counting its votes, a fitting finale to a historic election. Just look at all the records. Most voters, most women voters, most candidates and most political parties. It was indeed a massive exercise, but now comes the most important part, declaring the winner. We'll have to wait for the actual results, but over the weekend we got the exit polls. These are post-poll surveys. Voters are surveyed as they exit the polling station, hence the name exit polls. They give you a good idea about who is winning. And what does it say this time? The Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set for a third term, that too quite emphatically. Let's look at the News18 Mega exit poll. It gives 355 to 370 seats to the NDA. That's the National Democratic Alliance. It's basically the BJP's coalition. It's called the NDA. The opposition alliance is called India. They are projected to win between 125 and 140 seats. And finally, you have other parties, not part of either alliance. These parties are winning 42 to 52 seats. Now, to put this in context, the majority mark in India's Lok Sabha, in India's lower house of parliament, is 272. That's the magic number, 272. The NDA is comfortably over that mark, according to these polls. In fact, the BJP alone is at 305 to 315 seats. How does this compare to the last election? Again, let's pull up the numbers for you. In 2019, the BJP won 303 seats. Their alliance, the NDA, won 353 seats. So the exit polls are predicting a repeat of that, either the same numbers or slightly higher. The stock market seems quite happy about this. There was a bit of volatility leading up to the final phases of voting, but today it was all green. Both Sensex and Nifty hit all-time highs today. Nifty closed around 3.2% up, and Sensex closed almost 3.4% up in today's trade. So clearly, the markets are betting on continuity. The political reactions are along expected lines. The BJP is cheering the exit polls. Look at what the Prime Minister said, Prime Minister Modi. He said the opportunistic INDI alliance failed to strike a chord with the voters. They are casteist, communal and corrupt. Through the campaign, they only enhanced their expertise on one thing, Modi bashing. Such regressive politics has been rejected by the people. The opposition has trashed the exit polls. They've done their own internal assessment. And what does that say? That the India alliance will win more than 295 seats, basically enough to form a government. Listen in.
इसका नाम एग्जिट पोल नहीं है, इसका नाम मोदी मीडिया पोल है। ये मोदी जी का पोल है, फैंटेसी पोल है उनका। थैंक यू।
सर कितनी सीटें आ रही हैं आपके हिसाब से?
सिद्धू मूसेवाला का सॉन्ग सुना आपने? 295.
Now, nobody says exit polls are 100% accurate. In fact, they have gone wrong. But these numbers do not suggest a close contest. They suggest a landslide. So if they go wrong, it would be a major upset. I guess we'll have to wait till tomorrow for the final numbers. But for now, let's focus on the trends. What are the top highlights here from the exit polls? Number one, BJP's inroads in southern India. That's very, very significant. This region has traditionally been their weakness. But look at the progress. They're projected to win up to 3 seats in Tamil Nadu. They've never won seats there. Up to 3 seats in Kerala. Between 19 and 22 seats in Andhra Pradesh and up to 10 seats in Telangana. If these numbers hold, it would be historic. Highlight number 2, a wave from the east. I'm talking about 2 states here, Odisha and West Bengal. Regional parties have dominated both these states. They resisted the BJP wave in 2014 and 2019. But look at the exit polls. The BJP is projected to win 21 to 24 seats in West Bengal. That's more than the TMC, the Trinamool Congress, the party that rules the state at the moment. In Odisha, the BJP is projected to win up to 15 seats. Again, more than the ruling party. Highlight number 3. The Modi factor is still pulling voters. 2 states exemplify this, Karnataka and Telangana, both in the south. Both had assembly elections last year. They voted for Congress governments in the state elections. But come the Lok Sabha election, and they seem to have switched. The exit polls show the NDA leading the Congress party there. Clearly, they like Prime Minister Modi at the center. Highlight number 4, the opposition's miscalculation. They bet on a number of populist measures like a caste census, guaranteed government jobs and cash transfers. On paper, these should have attracted voters. If they did not, questions will be asked. Did the leadership vacuum affect them? Was the messaging weak, or did they get the voters' pulse wrong? Finally, highlight number 5, 400 plus still looks impossible. That was the BJP slogan coming into the election, but they shelved it halfway through. Probably with good reason. These exit poll numbers show why 400 plus is election Everest. There is only one way to scale it, to sweep the north, south, east and west, basically the whole country. Still, this is an impressive projection for the party, especially after 2 terms in office. The question is, will the real results mirror the exit polls? We'll be tracking it through the day tomorrow. Seven phases of voting done, counting to begin in just a few hours from now. India's election officials have pulled off a near miracle, but instead of feeling relieved or accomplished, they're feeling the heat. They find themselves in the dock with the opposition flinging charges at them. In fact, this has been the case throughout the election. India's poll officers have faced intense scrutiny. They've been called partisan and biased, which is unfortunate because while questions and debates make a democracy strong, constantly challenging the credibility of systems is counterproductive. So today, the Election Commission of India decided to respond. They called a press conference, the kind that has never happened before. The country's 3 election commissioners fielded questions, and they did so just a day before the votes are counted. In the past, they left it to their deputies, but today, India's chief election commissioner faced the press. His name is Rajiv Kumar, and his tone was combative.
On social media now, you will see various memes with the taglines that perhaps Lapata gentlemen are back. So, we were never out, we were always here. We chose to interact with you through our press notes.
He was referring to this, a meme featuring India's 3 election commissioners. It branded them missing. It went viral during the election. And why were they called missing? Because critics said they were slow to crack down on electoral malpractice. I'll give you an example. Consider what happened in West Bengal, where the Calcutta High Court pulled up the Election Commission. The TMC, or the Trinamool Congress Party, had moved court. Now, this is the party that is in power in West Bengal. They went to court over some election ads published by the BJP. These ads were published in newspapers. They said the TMC was a corrupt party, and the court ruled in the TMC's favor. The judges pulled up the Election Commission for failing to act against such ads and malpractices. Today, the poll body presented its defense. Listen in.
This is one of the general elections where we haven't seen violence. Over 90% of 495 major complaints which we received, we have conveyed it through the two press notes also to everybody, giving details of what happened.
Message that हमें ये नहीं होने देना, मसल नहीं होने देनी है, मनी पावर नहीं होने देना, ये सब चीजें छुप जा रही हैं, किसी दूसरे फेक नैरेटिव में ये सब चीजें छुप जा रही हैं.
Now the voting is done and the focus is on the counting process. The opposition parties have raised a new issue, postal ballots and how they're counted. Now in the past, postal ballots were counted first before the EVM votes. You could not start counting electronic votes until you were done with the postal ones. This time, the Election Commission has changed the rule. They decided to count postal ballots and electronic votes simultaneously. The opposition is opposed to this. They've asked, why change the rules? And this is the Election Commission's response.
ये जो एक्ट कहता है, जो रूल कहता है, वो क्लियर कहता है कि postal ballot counting will start first. So on all centers in the country, it will start first. No doubt about it. After only half an hour would start the EVM counting.
And then there was the issue of cross-verification of votes through VVPATs. That's the Voter Verified Paper Audit Trail, VVPAT. For every vote cast, a paper slip is generated. It can be used to cross-verify the electronic vote. But not all paper slips are checked. They're randomly picked from 5 booths in each constituency. And this too was challenged in the Supreme Court of India, but the court rejected the petitions. Then they were presented with another case over poll data. After the first couple of phases, the Election Commission had not released the voter turnout. The opposition said this shows lack of transparency. Why not share the numbers? But the court held back. They said they're taking a quote-unquote hands-off approach during the election. And a few days later, the Election Commission released the data on its own. So what happened here? India's Election Commissioner said a fake narrative is being created around the polls.
तो कभी वोटर लिस्ट खराब है, कभी ईवीएम खराब है, कभी ये खराब है, कभी काउंटिंग में एआरओ की टेबल पे आदमी नहीं है, 150 डीएम से बात कर ली. व्हाट इज दिस हैपनिंग इन द कंट्री? ये फेक नैरेटिव है जो चल रहा है. हम इसको समझने में पूरी तरीके से फेल किए, ये हम एडमिट करते हैं. आप समझ गए हैं.
He's used this term repeatedly, fake narrative, and this is a very serious charge. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of India have spoken about it in the past, about foreign interference and an attempt to malign India's electoral process. Now, the Chief Election Commissioner is saying the same, that a fake narrative was being created on discrepancy in voter lists, voter turnout, and the functioning of electronic voting machines. He said this could have led to anarchy. And we've discussed this on the show before. EVMs, or electronic voting machines, have been questioned after every election in the past 15 years. But now this is becoming a dangerous trend because it's not just about political exigencies or the need to find scapegoats after a defeat. This is beginning to undermine the credibility of Indian democracy. Now let's talk about the war in Gaza. Is Israel ready for a peace deal? Over the weekend, Joe Biden claimed that they are, and he released a plan. Apparently, it was proposed by the Israelis themselves, this peace plan. Biden says it was proposed by Israel. He posted it on social media. This is the post we're talking about. It describes a three-phase plan. Phase 1, Israel promises a ceasefire in exchange for some hostages and a partial troop withdrawal from the densely populated parts of Gaza. In Phase 2, a full withdrawal by Israel in exchange for all the hostages held by Hamas. And in Phase 3, stabilization and reconstruction, where Israel will support the rebuilding efforts in Gaza. Apparently, this plan has been relayed to Hamas by Qatar, which is not surprising because throughout this conflict, Qatar and Egypt have been playing mediators.
Now, after intensive diplomacy carried out by my team, my many conversations with leaders of Israel, Qatar, and Egypt, and other Middle Eastern countries, Israel has offered a comprehensive new proposal. It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
A permanent and enduring ceasefire. If Biden is to be believed, this offer was made by Israel. But today, Netanyahu appeared to be shifting the goalpost. He said Israel has some preconditions, something that Joe Biden failed to disclose.
We have maintained the goals of the war, and primarily the elimination of Hamas. We insist that we complete both.
So is the peace plan DOA dead on arrival? The U.S. has not given up. Washington says it is waiting for a response from Hamas. Behind the scenes, hectic diplomacy is underway. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is making phone calls. He has spoken to 2 Israeli leaders, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and opposition leader Benny Gantz. That's Netanyahu's main rival and a key member of Israel's war cabinet. Reports say Blinken is lobbying these leaders for a ceasefire. If it works out, there'll be a pause in fighting for 6 weeks, and that is when Israel and Hamas could negotiate a permanent truce.
This was an Israeli proposal. We have every expectation that if Hamas agrees to the proposal, as was transmitted to them, an Israeli proposal, that Israel would say yes.
They expect Israel to say yes. So America cannot guarantee the outcome. Now, this plan faces significant roadblocks and strong opposition. For starters, Netanyahu's allies are not on board. Specifically, 2 cabinet ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. 2 far-right politicians whose support is critical for Netanyahu to remain in power. Both leaders also hold important portfolios. Ben-Gvir is Israel's national security minister and Smotrich is the finance minister. They're said to be opposed to the ceasefire and they're threatening to quit the government over it. So Netanyahu has been put on notice. His coalition could collapse if he goes with the American ceasefire plan. Plus, he's at odds with his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, over the post-war plan for Gaza. Last month, Gallant made a demand. He said Israel should not rule over the Gaza Strip, and he wanted a public assurance from the Prime Minister on this.
In parallel to this important military operation, the security establishment, under my instructions, is preparing the governing alternative to Hamas, while we will isolate areas, remove Hamas operatives from these areas and introduce other forces that will enable an alternative government that will also threaten Hamas.
An alternative to the Hamas in Gaza. That's what Gallant wants. The Prime Minister has been non-committal. The Defense Minister says his team is already working on it. But this is fundamentally at odds with Biden's plan, because he wants them to negotiate with the Hamas, to coexist with them. So here's what we have. There's a peace plan on the table. The European Commission supports it. Regional powers like Egypt and Qatar also support it. America says the plan is Israel's idea, but Israel is clearly divided about it. And we've not even heard from Hamas, which unfortunately can influence how this goes. In other words, this is a peace plan that is still up in the air. Israel is facing another diplomatic spat, not with Europe, not with some Arab powerhouse, but with tiny Maldives. I bet this was not on your bingo card. Israel versus the Maldives. But what exactly happened here? The Maldives fired the first shot. Around 99% of the country's population is Muslim, so the public sentiment is pro-Gaza there. And this put pressure on President Mohamed Muizzu. Allies and rivals were united. They told Muizzu to ban Israeli tourists. Don't let them visit the Maldives. And Muizzu agreed. He announced a ban on Israeli passport holders. It's not clear when the ban will be enacted, but it's a done deal. And how is Israel reacting? They've asked Israeli citizens to not visit the Maldives, even dual citizens. They say don't go there. They've also asked Israelis already in the Maldives to return. But what's at stake here? Will this ban affect either country? Well, the Maldives welcomes around 1 million tourists. 15,000 of them are from Israel. So that's around 1.5%. But this year, traffic has been low. Less than 600 Israelis visited the Maldives from January to April. That's 88% down compared to last year. So the impact on tourism will be negligible. But what about the political impact? That could be far-reaching. The Maldives once recognized the state of Israel. This was back in 1965. The Israeli ambassador was the first to present his credentials to the Maldivian president. But in 1974, relations broke down. Cut to the 1990s, things looked up again. Israelis were allowed to visit the Maldives. Even normalization looked possible, especially when Mohammed Nasheed was president in Mali. He was widely considered pro-Israel. But in 2012, he was ousted. And in 2014, Israel and Hamas fought a war. So hopes of reconciliation were dashed. Another opportunity came in 2020. Israel was signing the Abraham Accords with Arab states, and reports said the Maldives was also interested. Many thought Mali would recognize Israel. But first the pandemic and then the war broke out. Looks like reconciliation will have to wait. And guess who could benefit from all of this? India. Israelis cannot visit the beaches of the Maldives, so their government is saying, go to India instead. Look at this post from Israel's embassy. It suggests 4 Indian beach destinations: Goa, Kerala, Lakshadweep, and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. An Israeli diplomat went one step ahead. He reposted Prime Minister Narendra Modi's pictures from Lakshadweep. Look at the caption. This is what the diplomat has said. Thanks to the Maldives government's decision, Israelis can now explore the beautiful beaches of Lakshadweep. Now, to give you some context, this trip by Prime Minister Modi had triggered a major diplomatic crisis. It led to a boycott campaign in India. So clearly, Israel is pressing the right buttons. But will this Maldivian ban hurt them? Not really. A, traveling is a luxury, it's not a necessity. So they can choose not to go to the Maldives. And B, Maldives is not the only beach nation. So Israel won't be too worried about Mali's ban. Having said that, the trend is worrying. The trend of countries banning or boycotting Israel. It doesn't look good. Just look at Turkey. Israel imported 40% of its concrete from Turkey, but Ankara decided to cut off all trade. So what did Israel do? They had to buy more expensive concrete from Europe. And this is just one example. Israel is not a self-sufficient country. They depend on others for imports. So while the Maldivian ban is not a worry, the trend is. And what about Muizzu? What does this move say about him? Well, it's pretty much on point. Mohamed Muizzu has adopted a muscular foreign policy. He has expelled Indian soldiers from his country, so banning Israeli tourists is not a surprise. Also, his support base will love it. Muizzu has banked on Islamic hardliners. Many of them voted and campaigned for him last year. Chances are they will love this ban. And Israel will have to take stock here, because they can't keep dismissing these diplomatic setbacks. First, 3 European nations recognized Palestine: Ireland, Spain, and Norway. What did Israel do? Call back their envoys. Now the Maldives has banned Israeli tourists. And what did Israel do? Again, brush it aside. But this is not a viable strategy. No country can live without partners or friends, not unless your idol is Kim Jong-un. So Israel needs to think long-term. Ignoring such seemingly minor moves may not be a wise strategy. Before I start my next story, let me show you a series of pictures. These are from 2020. And this is what you see in the pictures. Empty airports, stagnant conveyor belts, grounded flights, and airline crew out of jobs. This was how the aviation industry looked during the Wuhan virus pandemic. It was clearly a bad time for the sector. Travel was suspended, losses were mounting, and airlines were bleeding money every single day. Cut to 4 years later, and it looks like quite the U-turn. Here's a report by the International Air Transport Association. It's the trade association of global airlines, and this is the latest report that they've come out with. They've revised their profit forecasts for 2024. The aviation industry will earn nearly $1 trillion this year. Globally, $1 trillion. It's an all-time high, and that's because of a lot of factors. One, record number of passengers. Nearly 5 billion people will take flights this year, which is more than half of the global population. Reason number two, record volume of air cargo. That's transportation of goods through an air carrier. It's expected to reach 62 million tons in 2024, and all of this is boosting the revenue. But it's not just the earnings that are going up. The cost too will mount. Airlines worldwide have the same story. Rising labor costs, supply chain constraints, global geopolitical disruptions, and of course climate change, which is turbocharging turbulence, and airlines are paying the price for it. So the total cost for this year will also be high at around $936 billion. It's an annual increase of more than 9%, which leaves us with profits. Revenue minus cost. The airline industry is expected to clock around $30 billion in profits in 2024. It was around $27 billion last year, so profits will rise. Technically, it's not a significant number, a net profit of 3.1% per passenger. It's a profit of just about $6, so the margins are still quite tight. And yet, the turnaround is spectacular because just 4 years ago, this industry was in a slump with $140 billion in losses, and now it is making profits. But the road ahead is not smooth. The first issue is supply chains. More people are flying than ever before, but there's a shortage of everything. Planes, engines, flight parts, infrastructure, even the people who fly planes. There's a global shortage of pilots. It is hurting the industry. Right now, there are only two major plane makers in the world, Airbus and Boeing. In 2018, they delivered around 1,600 planes together, 1,600 planes in 2018. Last year, that number was just 1,100. So the supply gap is very much an issue, and it's unlikely to be resolved in the coming years. Both of these producers, Airbus and Boeing, are pretty much sold out of models until 2030. They've got a record number of orders. And leading this trend is the Gulf. Qatar, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they're preparing for an aviation boom. Look at their spendings. Emirates has ordered 95 new Boeing planes. They're worth $52 billion. Saudi Arabia will buy 105 Airbus planes. It's the biggest aircraft deal in the history of this kingdom. Dubai is already home to the world's second busiest airport, but now it is building an even bigger one. And it's all with good reason. Passenger traffic will double in West Asia by 2050 because of its unique geography. West Asia acts as a transit hub, a connector between the East and the West. In the coming years, Asia will drive global air traffic. We're talking about upcoming markets like India and Indonesia. This is where we'll see growth. With Gulf cities just a hop away, they will reap the benefits of this. But while West Asia prepares for a growing aviation sector, it's important that the world keeps up too. Airlines must be able to meet growing consumer demands, or we'll be left with sky-high fares and shrinking options.
Will you please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God"?
So help me God.
South Africa held its general elections on the 29th of May and the final results are out. It's official, the ANC has lost majority. That's the African National Congress Party, ANC. They've lost their parliamentary majority. The party first came to power in 1994. That's 30 years ago. And this year, in 2024, it has seen its worst performance ever. The ANC is the party of Nelson Mandela, the party that ended apartheid in South Africa. But their days of running South Africa alone are over. Now they will have to cobble together a coalition government. So who are the likely partners? What will influence the ANC's decision? And what happens to President Cyril Ramaphosa? Our next report has the details.
Thank you very much to all of you. The final announcement of the 2024 national and provincial election results today in many ways represents a victory for our democracy as South Africans. It also represents a victory of our constitutional order, but more importantly, it represents a victory for all the people of South Africa.
That was South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa. He said the elections were a victory for all the people of South Africa. But there are some South Africans who will feel that it was a defeat. Ramaphosa's own party, the African National Congress, won the most seats in these elections. They are the biggest party. But the ANC has lost sole control of South Africa after 3 decades. For the last 30 years, ever since the ANC under Nelson Mandela helped end apartheid, the party has ruled the country. It won every election with an absolute majority. But this time, they only won 159 seats out of 400. They need 42 more seats to get back control of the parliament. That means the ANC will have to form a coalition if it wants to remain in power. So far, only 2 other parties have more than 42 seats. South Africa's main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, and the MK party, led by former President Jacob Zuma. If the ANC ties up with either of them, it can return to power with just one coalition partner. The DA already seems keen on starting coalition talks.
I can today announce that the DA's federal executive has unanimously adopted a resolution to initiate exploratory talks with other parties that share a commitment to the South African Constitution and to identify options for the formation of governments at a national and provincial level where no party has obtained an outright majority.
The DA controls South Africa's Western Cape province, so an ANC-DA coalition will end up controlling 8 out of 9 provinces in South Africa and 246 seats in parliament. But the ANC may not go for this because of the DA's free market economic policies. The ANC and the DA have fundamental differences in their economic outlook. The ANC's other coalition option, the MK party, is almost a non-starter because it is led by former President Jacob Zuma. Zuma and Ramaphosa are considered bitter rivals. Zuma has said that he won't ally with the ANC if Ramaphosa remains president. But so far, the ANC has rejected that demand. Now, there is a third option, a multi-party coalition. The 4th biggest party after the election is the Economic Freedom Fighters. The EFF won 39 seats. That's not enough for the ANC to reach the halfway mark. But the EFF is an ideologically similar ally for the ANC. Their leader, Julius Malema, was a former ANC youth leader. But an ANC-EFF coalition would need at least one more ally. That means more partners that the ANC will have to listen to. More partners that could hold the ANC to ransom by threatening to leave. That could lead to an unstable government. Will the ANC risk bringing a third party on board? Or will they choose to go for a strong, stable government with the DA? The ANC only has 2 weeks to decide.
Now let's look at another election on the other side of the planet in Mexico. Mexico held its presidential election on Sunday, and there's no uncertainty about the future there. The winning party's candidate swept the polls. There is no doubt that Claudia Sheinbaum will be Mexico's next president.
I want to thank you as well, because for the first time in the 200 years of the Republic, I will become the first woman president of Mexico. Thank you to the people of Mexico. This is your triumph.
It was a tough election and the bloodiest in Mexico's modern history. 37 candidates were killed in the run-up to these polls, 37. But Sheinbaum managed to win despite the chaos. The preliminary results show that she won the election with a landslide. Mexico's National Election Institute says she secured between 58 and 60% of the vote. Her closest rival has won less than 30% and conceded defeat.
I recognize that the trends for President of Mexico does not favor me, and there is no information suggesting that this can change in the district counts. A few minutes ago, I spoke with Dr. Claudia Sheinbaum to recognize the result of the election.
So who is Mexico's new president-elect? Claudia Sheinbaum is a scientist. She has won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on climate change. She has a PhD in energy engineering. In 2007, she contributed to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There, she and her team wrote about mitigation and won the Nobel Peace Prize for their work. Sheinbaum also has some experience with governance. Between the year 2000 and 2006, she was Mexico City's Environment Secretary. This is the country's capital, Mexico City. In 2015, she was the mayor of one of Mexico City's boroughs. And in 2018, she became the mayor for all of Mexico City. She was also the first woman to hold that job. And come October 1st, she will be Mexico's first woman president.
We will govern for everyone, men and women, but as the humanistic principle of our movement, for the good of everyone, first take care of the poor.
The presidential term begins on October 1st. It will be a 6-year term, and that's it. Mexican presidents are not permitted to run for re-election. They have just one term to get the job done, and this system has benefited her. She's been a long-time ally of the outgoing president AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He was Mexico City's mayor between the year 2000 and 2005. He was the one who tabbed Sheinbaum for Environment Secretary, and the two have been working together since then. Obrador was thrilled that his protege won the presidency.
With all my affection, respect, I congratulate Claudia Sheinbaum, who was triumphant in this race by a wide margin. She's going to be the first woman president of Mexico in 200 years. But also the president with probably the highest number of votes in the history of our country.
Sheinbaum will be Mexico's first female president. She'll also be the country's first president of Jewish descent. And this is significant because over 70% of Mexico's population identifies as Christian. Her win was a watershed moment for multiple reasons then. But she did not really discuss her Jewish heritage on the campaign trail. She said that her parents were atheists and she grew up removed from the Jewish community. Despite this, she was the target of racist and xenophobic attacks during the campaign. A former Mexican president accused her of being a Bulgarian Jew, an outsider to Mexico. In response, she released a birth certificate saying that she was 100% Mexican and she had the documents to prove it. Sheinbaum got past the bigotry. She also had to overcome rampant sexism, and in the end, she won the presidential election. We wish her the best of luck. Our next story is from Turkey. Yesterday, thousands took to the streets of Istanbul. They'd come out to protest against a draft law, a law that would allow Turkey to put down stray dogs. Turkey has a stray dog problem. There are millions of them all over the country because the Turkish government failed to keep them in check. They did not devote enough resources to manage this problem, so the number of strays kept growing, and now Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is going for the nuclear option. He wants to legalize the killing of stray dogs to deal with them, to deal with the problem caused by government negligence. But many in Turkey are against this. They want a more humane solution. Here's our report.
Turkey has proposed a draft bill. The government wants to amend the country's animal rights law so that they can legally euthanize stray dogs. People across Turkey are angry about this, and thousands took to the streets of Istanbul yesterday to protest against what they call the death law.
We will defend the rights of those silent species until the end. We are absolutely against the death law that is presented to us under the name of anesthesia. We will never accept it.
We say no to death. If we humans have the right to live, all living beings have the right to live. So what does it mean to put them to sleep? What does it mean to end a life? Who gives this right?
The Turkish government under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan wants to give itself the right to put down stray dogs. Erdogan himself has demanded this. He asked for urgency from his party to legalize euthanasia for dogs. Erdogan's party, the Justice and Development Party or AKP, is trying to downplay the new bill. The party says it will not kill stray dogs immediately. They have proposed to first capture the stray dogs, sterilize them and put them up for adoption. If the sterilized stray dogs don't get adopted in 30 days, only then will they be euthanized. AKP officials have promised that the dogs will be killed compassionately and painlessly via lethal injection.
We want all animals taken into shelters to be adopted. We believe that especially our animal lovers will take more responsibility by adopting these dogs in the shelters during this period. If we can achieve this, we think there will be no need for the next step.
But here's the problem. Turkey has approximately 4 million stray dogs. There's already a scheme to house stray dogs in Istanbul. They have an app for the scheme as well. But in all of 2023, only 375 stray dogs were adopted under Istanbul's scheme. That's a drop in the ocean when you consider the scale of the problem.
The municipalities say they will collect the dogs from the streets, but there is no capacity to take them all. A group of dogs will be collected and kept for 30 days, and if not adopted, they will be euthanized. Will the municipal teams, who have not even done their duty to neuter them, work for the adoption of these animals? Of course not.
Turkey's stray dog problem has been growing unchecked for years. Only about 260,000 dogs are neutered annually. And now, municipalities are expected to round up 15 times that number of strays, sterilize them all, and work to get them adopted in 30 days. If they have the capacity to do that, then why couldn't they just sterilize enough dogs over all these years? That should have been easier than what Erdogan is suggesting right now, which is to kill millions of dogs. But it has been done before. In 1910, Turkey sent 80,000 dogs to an island near Istanbul with no food or water. The dogs ended up killing each other or dying of hunger and thirst. Animal lovers in Turkey don't want a repeat of that cruelty, and that's why they are taking a stand against Erdogan and his policies.
Football and racism, two things that go hand in hand in Europe. Expected to blow up this month because the Euros are around the corner. It's one of the biggest football tournaments in the world. Germany is hosting this time, but they're in the news for all the wrong reasons. Germany's state TV is making a documentary. It talks about diversity in the national football team. As part of the story, a poll was conducted. Around 1,300 people were surveyed, and guess what they were asked? Do you want more white players in the football team? Don't check your calendar, it's still 2024, but people are still asking about skin color. And what about the response? 21% residents said yes, Imagine that. A fifth of Germany's population wants more white players in their team. What explains this? We looked at Germany's national side. We also looked at their probable 11. 6 out of the 11 players are white. Then you have players of African descent. You also have players of Turkish descent, much like Germany's demography. So what more do the people want? The national team has hit out at this poll. The first to criticize was Joshua Kimmich. He is a World Cup winner with Germany. He called the survey absolutely racist. Now the coach has also joined in. He has asked the people of Germany to wake up.
It's good the way it is, and we're playing a European championship for everyone in the country, and everyone who can play top-class football is invited to be a national team player and give their all for their country. And that's what we're doing. And I hope I never have to read anything about such crappy polls again.
The poll reveals how divided Germany is. Overall, 21% people want more white players. But among far-right supporters, the number is much higher. Almost 47% of them want more white players. So the issue is not just the poll, the issue is also the racist response. It goes back to Germany's relaxed border policy. We've seen 2 examples of that. The first in 2015, when Germany welcomed more than 1 million refugees, most of them were from Syria. Then again in 2022, when Germany welcomed 1.2 million refugees, this time from Ukraine. These moves sent out a clear message to the world that Germany welcomes outsiders. Just look at the population split. In 2011, 92% of their population was German. Basically, white European, 92% of the population. Now it's 85%. You have around 2% Turkish people, 1.4% Ukrainian, and more than 1% Syrian. And this is commendable. It shows that Germany did not expel migrants, but not expelling is a low bar. It's also a question of how you treat them. I'll give you an example from last year. Germany was playing in the Under-21 Euro Championship. They drew a match against Israel. 2 German players missed their penalties in that match, both of African descent. One of them summed it up best. This is what he said: "When we win, we are all Germans. If we lose, then we are the blacks, and the monkey comments come out." It's true. Another player painted a more grim picture. He played 2 World Cups for Germany, yet he was always called the N-word, apparently more than 1,000 times. And it's not just Germany. France experienced something similar. In 2018, they had 12 players of African descent in their squad, so people called them an African team. But this statement ignores a basic fact that around 15% of France's population is non-white. England has, as always, took it up several notches. They played the Euro final in 2021, but they lost in the penalties. 3 England players missed their strikes. All 3 were non-white players. You can imagine what happened next. A deluge of racist attacks and comments. Eventually, the Prime Minister had to wade in. Now, all of these examples stem from the same problem, a reluctance to accept the new reality. France is not an all-white country anymore, neither is Germany or Britain, so their sports teams will also look different. They will look multicultural. Instead of accepting that, some people unleash hatred. I guess it has once again exposed European nations. They've spent decades lecturing others on diversity and tolerance. Easy to say when your society is not diverse. But look at their response when the shoe is on the other foot. The question is, will anyone criticize the mighty Europeans? For our last story tonight, let me tell you about a new hot vacation spot. It has luxury facilities, TVs in every room, exotic animals, a pond full of crocodiles, and even farm fresh eggs. If you're wondering where this luxury resort is, well, let me tell you, this is a prison in Guatemala, nicknamed the Little Hell Prison. But until now, it was not run by the police. It was managed by gangs. The police have just entered the picture and arrested 200 gang members. They have emptied the prison, aiming to reclaim it. Our next report tells you about the Las Vegas of prisons.
Rooms full of TVs and refrigerators. A chicken farm, a lake full of crocodiles, and rooms with exotic animals. If you think I'm talking about a world-class zoo, or even a bizarre upscale farm, well, think again. This is a prison in Guatemala, nicknamed the Little Hell Prison. The police don't run it, but gangs do. Located 70 kilometers from the country's capital, the prison has a notorious reputation. It is home to 225 members of the Barrio 18 gang. They committed crimes, they were put in prison, but in this one, life isn't so bad.
Yes, among the leaders we have here are many members from the 18th Street gang, and many of them have been involved in extortion and murder.
It was going so well for them that they even ran a call center from inside the prison. It was, of course, for criminal purposes. Besides that, rooms had air conditioning, some fridges, TV sets, and even musical equipment. The Barrio 18 gang was clearly living it up in this prison.
During the tour, we found plasterboard walls and some other benefits like air conditioning, musical equipment, and even refrigerators. They were living very comfortably inside this prison.
When they weren't chasing comfort, they were raising animals. And not just regular ones. These were exotic owls, raccoons, and even a lake full of crocodiles. Because who needs a garden view when you have predators patrolling your backyard? And when the gang members weren't looting people, they were raising chickens. Because what's a gangster's life without some fresh eggs for breakfast? But like every other good thing, this too came to an end. Around 400 police officers crashed their party, arresting over 200 gang members and moving them to other prisons. The Interior Minister has vowed to reclaim the prison and strip it of luxury. She blamed previous governments for handing over control of prisons to criminals. Crime is not new in Guatemala. In 2023, violence killed over 4,000 people in the country. Half of these deaths were because of gangs and drug trafficking. The Barrio 18 also fights for control of territory. They extort money from both individuals and companies, and if you refuse, you're killed. They were convicted for their crimes, but looks like until now there was no real punishment for them, just a bittersweet taste of freedom behind bars.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Sri Lanka, heavy rain triggers floods and mudslides, leaving several people dead. In Pakistan, 6 white-lion cubs steal the show at the Karachi Zoo. Millions in Brazil kick off Pride Month with a massive parade. And finally, we're taking you back in history on this day in 1940. Around 335,000 Allied troops were evacuated from Dunkirk. They'd been sandwiched between the sea and Nazi soldiers. Britain had to enlist fishing boats and ferries to bring back the trapped troops. It remains one of the biggest and most miraculous evacuations in military history. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for Result Day. Our coverage begins at 6 a.m. India time.
The world is just a few months away from witnessing an unparalleled sports spectacle, the 2024 Olympic Games. This year, the iconic city of Paris is the host, and the city is determined to create an unforgettable event. For the first time, the opening ceremony won't be on land. Paris has a visionary plan to hold it on the Seine River. But the excitement doesn't stop there. The Olympic Committee has chosen 90-year-old Omar Dime to carry the Olympic torch.
They told me, we want a Senegalese rifleman to be designated for the port of the Olympic flame, but it is you that we chose. What do you think? I stayed a few minutes. I said, okay, this is an honor for me.
Why choose a man who had never even heard of the torch before? Omar Dime was born in Senegal, a country once under French colonial rule. He joined the Senegalese tirailleurs in 1953. The former rifleman was inspired by those who returned with honors. He volunteered to fight in Indochina, where France, supported by the US, fought the Chinese-backed Viet Minh. Then he fought in the Algerian War. After Senegal gained independence in 1960, Dime re-enlisted in the Senegalese army. After his service, he settled in northeast Paris, eventually becoming a French citizen. In 2023, the French government allowed the remaining tirailleurs to receive their pensions without needing to spend half the year in France. After this, Dime returned to Senegal.
There I am locked in my little room. You see no one. Sometimes people even die in their rooms, a few people. Before we know it, they've already rotted in it. That's not a life. I am very happy really, very happy to be back in my family.
For Dime, being chosen as a torchbearer is a deep honor. He's one of the 20 men from his village who served France. Many of his comrades returned wounded or didn't return at all.
The choice of my person is a miracle for me. My solitude touches in part my companions from Indochina, Algeria, and even the National Army. Many have served the National Army. They are no longer there. There are even young people I trained in the National Army. They have all left. So if God leaves me so far, I'm just thanking God.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.